I'm usually kind of 50-50 on trigger warnings. However, if you tend to panic or spiral in response to lacking a stable sense of reality, maybe don't watch this. A lot of the script I wrote is about how I learned to cope with my own psychotic tendencies by accepting unreality, but I remember how bad stuff like that would fuck me up before, and I don't want to spring that on anyone who's unprepared. I was monologuing to myself, as I often do, about my usual psychotic nonsense, and the brainworms told me to write down what I was saying and record it, and I must oblige. I love obfuscating responsibility for my own decisions. I've been thinking about the delusional nature of reality as the human brain perceives it, how the world that humans on average narcissistically and naively treat as objective truth is really just a limited processing of sensory input as the human brain evolved to process it, and how that ties into psychosis and schizophrenia. The word schizophrenia gets thrown around very liberally these days by people who maybe do experience some level of delusion and feel the right to hyperbolize it, or people who see it as a punchline. I do understand schizophrenia to be a debilitating mental illness, which can be extremely disabling and difficult to live with. However, certain symptoms of it don't at all strike me as illogical, in the same way that certain symptoms of autism are generally disabling, and others can actually make you more able at certain things than your average neurotypical. Maybe this is my own history of psychotic delusion speaking, but treating the world as you know it as objective truth in itself seems delusional. You do not know anything. Other animals have evolved to hear frequencies and see wavelengths that humans are completely blind to, or perceive the same wavelengths in a drastically different way. If a cat can hear 44,000 hertz higher than a human being, and a huge variety of nocturnal animals literally glow in the dark, really look into bioluminescence, it's really cool, but only certain animals can see, how can a human being believe that anything he sees is a reflection of what's really happening around him? That doesn't mean you should spiral and forgo all consequence-based decision-making because nothing is real. The world you live in is still very real to you. In a sense, the only world you know is your brain, and it might be the only world you'll ever know. In a sense, no. Bah. Sorry. Keeping this sense of unreality in mind, for me, has been extremely liberating. I still care about myself and my life, but nothing seems so claustrophobic or cataclysmic anymore. It's like the more evolved version of we're all on a floating rock in space. Nothing is that serious, but everything you feel and experience is still as real as anything. This outlook has also ironically played a huge part in helping me deal with my own psychotic tendencies. Instead of asking myself, is this real or true, I ask, is this consequential and does it serve me to follow this train of thought? Is someone else puppeteering the minds and bodies of my loved ones? Maybe. Anything is possible, and I will never fully know something to be true. But do I have actively any reason to think that by now? No. Nothing that doesn't have a much easier and more likely explanation. Just because it could be true doesn't mean it is, and trying to prove anything beyond a shadow of a doubt is the equivalent of that image of the snake eating his own ass. I do think, to an extent, the freeing nature of unreality is one of the things keeping certain drugs criminalized. Similar to schizophrenia, drug addiction, overdose, and brain damage are very real things, and I'm definitely not pro-hard drugs. However, alcohol, the one drug legal in most third world countries, most first world countries, statistically has a higher rate of violence than any other drug. If drug laws were really put in place to protect people, which most laws demonstrably aren't, wouldn't alcohol be illegal too? My slightly schizophrenic brain is telling me that the drug which limits your capacity for thought, stupefies you, and makes you complacent, being legal, is not a coincidence. And the drugs which expand your perception, however hallucinatory and inaccurate, showing you the frailty of your brain's own perception, are not. This isn't me saying you should do drugs. I personally have never done a hallucinogen, don't really want to, and wouldn't advocate it due to risks like overdose, which could result in brain damage. But alcohol can result in brain damage and death too. I also don't really drink. But awareness of the variety of ways that your brain can perceive the world and hallucinate things that look just as real as what everyone else sees can be liberating to some people when approached right. And the controlling classes do not want you to be liberated. They want you trapped in a box of your own perception. They want you to believe this is all there is, I think. In Minecraft.